Coming up on We Talk News this week, the head of the U.S. Health and Human Services Department in Washington, D.C. confirms that report on rescheduling cannabis will be ready for President Biden before the end of this year. In Maryland, the Cookies dispensary gets shut down for multiple marketing violations. Sales of adult use of cannabis passes medical sales for the first time in Connecticut. But a botched cannabis carjacking in Hartford ends with the murder of an 18-year-old student from UConn. And the first Flower Expo in Massachusetts launches in Greenfield to rave reviews and a packed parking lot for the private B2B event. All that and coast-to-coast cannabis reports on We Talk News next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another weekly edition of We Talk News with Elena Pinto. No, I'm not Elena Pinto. I am PCM Founder Jimmy Young, filling in for Elena, who's on vacation for the rest of this month. Our top story this week is finally some encouraging news about the descheduling of cannabis at the federal level. The head of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Xavier Becerra, told Marijuana Moment in Washington, D.C. that he expects his report will be presented to President Biden before the end of this year. Our man in Washington, D.C. is Andrew Berenger, and he has more.
Hello, this is Andrew Berenger from Washington, D.C., reporting for We Talk News. In cannabis federal news, the head of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has committed to presenting President Joe Biden with a federal cannabis scheduling decision this year, per the president's directive that a decision be issued at the federal level. The Food and Drug Administration is conducting a comprehensive 8-step scientific review of cannabis to inform on the scheduling decision. This decision will impact whether cannabis remains a Schedule I drug, which is the category for the most strictly controlled drugs under the Controlled Substances Act. HHS, in collaboration with other agencies, including the Drug Enforcement Agency, is working to provide on an evidence-based recommendation to the president. In other news, the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, also known as CADCA, a leading anti-drug group, recently warned that the bipartisan cannabis banking reform bill, which grants cannabis businesses access to FDIC-insured banks, would have severe consequences if passed by Congress, including an alarming rise in traffic fatalities, increased youth use rates, and a surge in emergency room visits and hospitalizations. The impact of cannabis legalization on traffic safety remains a topic of debate. Numerous studies, including federally funded research, have shown that teen consumption of cannabis remains stable or even declined after states establish a regulated adult use market. Now, that's all for the federal level. In Maryland cannabis news, recently, a federal judge has ruled that Mackie Barch, co-founder of Maryland's largest medical cannabis enterprise, Culta, must return $6.4 million worth of company shares to his partner due to his failure to fulfill an agreement for equal equity ownership division. Neither Barch's nor the plaintiff's names were originally listed on the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission application in 2015, citing tax and legal complications as the reason. Barch, who has a prior misdemeanor drug possession conviction, transferred his ownership shares to comply with regulations barring him from owning a cannabis business. The impending opening of Maryland's adult use cannabis market this July 1st is expected to bring significant changes to the local industry and market. Stay tuned for further updates. Well, that will do it for me, Andrew Berenger, in the DC area report for We Talk News. Have a good day.
Interesting to note here that all the previous stories were from states that are relatively new to the legal cannabis industry. Now, that doesn't mean that the markets in Washington State or Oregon are thriving. In fact, both states are great examples of the regulatory and compliance rules and laws that are in place as the industry becomes more normalized, and they still have issues. Here's Matthew Friedlander in Washington and Marianne Kersage in Oregon.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for We Talk News. The New York Times today highlighted one of the dynamics of the Oregon-Idaho border. The small Oregon town of Ontario is one of the hottest for cannabis sales because it is right on the Idaho border. Customers from Idaho have a huge impact on sales in Ontario. This will change if Idaho legalizes. Also, the dumpster fire that is the Oregon regulatory agencies continues to overreact to the fallout of the LaModa tax delinquencies. While agencies have had authority since 2019 to consider tax matters while renewing cannabis licenses, they have not exercised this authority, which contributed to the lack of oversight causing the LaModa debacle. Now, temporary rules are being passed that will require all taxes to be paid or to be on a payment plan for all owners of retail licenses in order to renew the license. Taxes include not only state sales tax and business taxes, but also personal taxes. This is a huge overreach, which will cause unimaginable ripple effects. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
One of our most proud features in our news is our international reporters. So now let's go overseas to see what's happening in the European market and in Canada. Lex Pelger reports from France, and Debbie Facey is in Ontario.
Hello everyone, I'm Lex Pelger from Whitewell Creation with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. On hemp leaves, a big change from the European Commission. Currently, it's been 4 years since the European Commission made the controversial decision to classify all parts of the hemp plant as a novel food, meaning that companies in the EU would need to apply for novel food status in order to legally sell cannabinoid-based products containing less than 0.3% THC. This week, after the European Industrial Hemp Association made the proposal last year and presented evidence that hemp leaves were commonly used for making hemp tea infusions prior to 1997, the Commission agreed to modify the novel food catalog and remove hemp leaves from it. This will help companies who use hemp leaves in their products be safe from seizures or unnecessary administrative requirements. However, any companies producing full-spectrum hemp extracts or CBD isolates in EU will still be required to go through a novel food application. After the Czech Republic's recent proposed ban of CBD under novel food laws, the European Industrial Hemp Association has launched a separate bid to have natural hemp-extracted products classified as a traditional food. We'll keep you informed as this proposal winds through the EU bureaucracy. In Malta, after widespread criticism of their pioneering regulatory framework for adult-use cannabis, the Authority for the Responsible Use of Cannabis has released a new set of fine-tuned rules based on stakeholder feedback. It's been argued that the previous rules made it quite difficult for the grassroots community members and legacy growers to set up the cannabis associations that Malta designated as the primary way to provide cannabis to people. One important change is to allow a modular approach to the Cannabis Association application. With this, the groups will not have to secure a lease on a property before they know that their application will be moving forward. Also, the stringent testing requirements will be dialed down, especially because there are only 2 testing machines on the entire archipelago. Another rule change is for the transportation of cannabis. Previously, cannabis could only be transported by individuals with the same license needed to transport toxic, radioactive, and explosive substances. But now there will be a new certification for cannabis alone issued by the regulatory body itself. However, it will still be required that cannabis will only be transported in tracked, temperature-controlled trucks with the products inside a locked safe. Finally, associations will no longer be required to incinerate their cannabis waste at landfills and will now be allowed to compost it instead. With a year and a half since the set up the Authority for the Responsible Use of Cannabis, the hope is that these rule changes will expand applications from the current 7 and lead to some of these associations actually getting approved and up and running. Finally, in Lithuania, the parliament just approved their national agenda for drugs and harm reduction through 2035. One of the proposals would decriminalize the possession, acquisition, storage, and transportation of small amounts of cannabis. Under this proposal, instead of criminal penalties, those caught with cannabis would face fines of 50 to 300 euros. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from Whitewell Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
Now we turn to the world of publicly traded cannabis stocks, a group of stocks that are particularly volatile. Hexo and Tilray are no exception. Hexo is ready to be acquired by Tilray Brands that is sure to put another wrinkle into reading the tea leaves or the 7-pointed leaf called cannabis. Here's Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report, reporting for Weed Talk News. Let's discuss some Canadian cannabis companies, Aurora Cannabis and Hexo. They both reported some major losses. First, Aurora Cannabis lost $65 million for 3 months ending in March 31st, 2023. And next, Hexo reported a total net loss before tax of $98 million in the company's third quarter. But Hexo is still taking over Tilray for $56 million. Seems crazy to me, but that's this week's cannabis stock report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
At the top of the show, we told you that U.S. Health and Human Services Director Xavier Becerra told Marijuana Moment that that he expects to have his Biden-directed report on or descheduling of cannabis off the most restricted Schedule I of Controlled Substances Act before the end of this year. Now the Pennsylvania House wants to lend their support. Here's Claudia Post with our Pennsylvania Cannabis Report.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. Referred to the House Pennsylvania Judiciary Committee on May 30th and amended on June 7th, House Resolution 420 urged the removal of cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance, listing several points opposing the current placement of cannabis as a Schedule I narcotic. The bill stated that as of March 2023, 38 states had approved cannabis for medical purposes and 21 states had legalized cannabis for recreational use. After providing the definition of a Schedule I substance under the 1971 Controlled Substances Act, a substance considered to have high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use, that's the definition. The bill listed medical conditions that scientific research has shown cannabis to be helpful in treating, including epilepsy, chronic pain, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Also noted was the classification of fentanyl as a Schedule II substance of 70,000 American deaths in 2021 to overdoses involving synthetic opioids. Well, there you go. Therefore, the House of Representatives of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania urges the Congress of the United States, the President of the United States, and the Attorney General of the United States, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Department of Health, to remove cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance under the Controlled Substances Act. Now, this is a big deal for Pennsylvania. We're really stepping out here because there's a lot of conservatives here, but I believe that, of course, we're all aiming for recreational in the very near future. Well, that's a wrap. I'm Claudia Post. I'll be here next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. From Weed Talk News, have a fabulous week.
One of the most challenging reforms in legal states and at the federal level is how to detect a plant medicine like cannabis that stays in your system for 30 days, especially if you are driving under the influence, because driving under the influence of alcohol has been proven many, many times how dangerous that is. And Mothers Against Drunk Driving did a great job of educating the public back starting in 1980. That was in California. Now, detecting an impaired driver under the influence of cannabis has become a favorite issue of prohibitionists who are not in favor of reform. In fact, even in New Hampshire, where the state controls their legal alcohol industry, the Live Free or Die state has made some noise about reforming their laws for adult use, but have yet to get that out of their Senate. Sure enough, in the Senate session this week, that OUI or DUI issue was brought up again before their summer recess. That pretty much ended the latest reform efforts in the only state in New England that has not made the adult use legal. Here's another report from a mature cannabis state, the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. There are adult use cannabis licenses issued in the city of Riverview, but nobody's sure for how long that will last. That's because a citizens group has gathered enough signatures to have a challenge to that policy placed on the August primary ballot. City Council in December authorized the storefronts, but currently none of them are open. The citizen group Let Riverview Vote collected almost 600 signatures in time to have the vote take place in August, when fewer voters show up to the polls and the voting demographic tends to skew towards the elderly. A pro-cannabis group from the city has launched VoteNo.net in order to rally support for the cannabis businesses. But this is not the first time a group in Michigan has entertained a move to ban existing cannabis businesses from city streets. Langsburg, in the last election cycle, voted to roll back their 2 cannabis retail operations to a single retailer. But other local efforts to ban cannabis businesses have failed to get the votes. Well, Traverse City is the #1 place in the USA for cannabis use, according to a recent ranking by an online sports betting organization. According to their research, more than 65% of Traverse City residents have tried cannabis in the past, and that leads the nation. Second place for most cannabis users per capita, Grand Rapids, with more than 64% of residents reporting that they get high. Having said that, the ranking also rated Traverse as the cocaine capital of America, with about 24% of residents reporting powder inhalation. These figures come as the betting group tries to name the nation's top 10 wildest cities. In addition to measuring cannabis and cocaine use, the group factored in casino availability, number of strip clubs per 100,000 residents, and self-reported heavy or binge drinking among residents and visitors. Traverse City was #3 on the wildest cities list, and Grand Rapids was the #10 wildest in the nation, with Reno, Nevada, taking the top spot. Now, there's a lot to criticize in this ranking. Traverse City has just over 15,000 residents, and that small population certainly skewed the per capita numbers significantly. Plus, everybody knows Grand Rapids is just not that fun. To see all the wildest ranking results, you can go to olbg.com. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
There's a horrible story coming out of Connecticut later last week. An 18-year-old student from UConn had his car held up and was murdered. Police reported that there was an abundance of cannabis in that car, and that probably is why his car was targeted. Connecticut is one of the newest New England states to start their adult use market, and we now have a reporter from the Nutmeg State. Her name is Angie Seifert.
I'm Angie Seifert from Skip Intro Advisors with the Connecticut Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. A new regulation was signed by Governor Ned Lamont, allowing medical and adult use cannabis licensees to deduct, for state tax purposes, ordinary and necessary business expenses that would typically be eligible for a federal tax deduction, but aren't because of cannabis being considered Schedule I, as known as 280E. Connecticut isn't the only state with a tax relief as a goal. New York, New Jersey, and Illinois are also discussing and passing legislation on these matters. This will be a game changer for cannabis entrepreneurs in Connecticut and these other states looking to get off the ground with working capital available. Additionally, adult use sales both hit a record high in May and also surpassed medical sales, which is very common in legal states. 11.5 million adult use sales and 11.2 million medical sales, totaling 22.7 million for the month. Monthly adult use sales have more than doubled since retailers opened shop. And while more individual items purchased at medical dispensaries compared to adult use, the average price in the medical program was about $4 less than the adult use market. Come July 1st, it will be free registration to get a medical license, and currently there is no excise tax and potency cap for medical. I'm looking forward to seeing if this will impact the relationships between adult use and medical. Finally, cannabis delivery has commenced. Fine Federal's Manchester location has partnered with Green Coach Delivery, who is currently one of the 12 licensed cannabis delivery services in the state. There is no cost markup on delivery of cannabis items, though there is a $10 delivery fee on orders less than $150, and currently there is a geographic limit. Fine Federal is the first to offer this delivery option in Connecticut, and it won't be the last. That's the Connecticut Cannabis News Report for this week. I'm Angie Seifert from Skip Intro Advisors, reporting for Weed Talk News.
Meanwhile, Vermont just continues to develop their legal adult use market and its outdoor growing season in Vermont. A short season for sure, but still very impactful. Here's Jessie Lynn Dolan with the Vermont Report, sponsored by Canatrol.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. On June 14th, Governor Scott allowed what was once called the Omnibus Cannabis Bill to pass into law without his signature, mimicking how all other Vermont cannabis laws have moved forward. This bill adds some needed protections for small farmers and social equity in the adult use market and increases some supports for patients in the medical program. On June 22nd, Vermont Growers Association will be hosting their monthly community discussion for cultivators by cultivators. The market is what we make it. On June 24th, Vermont Growers Association will also be hosting the first of its kind cannabis job fair for those interested in hiring or seeking employment. For more information on both, visit vermontgrowers.org. The Green Mountain Patients Alliance is hosting a harm reduction and education workshop on June 23rd at Forbin's finest adult use retailer in Barre to discuss the Vermont opioid crisis and the synergy between cannabis and opioids, as well as the Vermont Cannabis Nurses Association training participants in Narcan administration. For more information, visit greenmountainpatients.org. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Canatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at canatrols.com. The nation's oldest and most lucrative cannabis state market is California. The largest, most progressive state in the country still is struggling with trying to how to figure out how to regulate their adult use industry while taking a bite out of the deeply rooted legacy market. It's complicated. That's why we're so happy to welcome a new reporter to We Talk News. She's Lavana Vasa, and this is her first California cannabis report.
Hi, I'm Lavana Vasa, and this is what's happening in the California cannabis industry right now. One of the most interesting stories currently unfolding is about the Catalyst versus Greenhouse Brands court case. A complaint was filed on June 6, 2023 at the Los Angeles County Superior Court by the Office of Jeff Augustini for 562 Discount Med Inc., aka Catalyst, a Long Beach-based licensed distributor and retail competitor, to Glasshouse Brands Inc., who is a Goliath, California-based cannabis brand. The complaint accuses the defendant of bad business practices. They claim that the defendant, Glasshouse Brands, has been profiting off of black market sales by using burner distros to ship their products via airplane nationwide. They also accuse the defendant of publicly posting the revenue generated from these black market sales to boost their brand's value. A little about Glasshouse Brands. The company was founded in 2015 by Kyle Kazan, a former law enforcement officer, and Graham Ferrara, with 150 square foot cultivation in Santa Barbara. The partners quickly stacked licenses up and doubled their grow to 300K. They now operate the largest cultivation in the state with over 2 million square feet of greenhouses, with the capacity to grow more than 300,000 pounds annually. In 2020, they made headlines by becoming listed on the Canadian stock market, raising $140 million in capital, which they used to buy their state-of-the-art 5.5 million acre grow in Ventura County. In 2022, they reported $90 million in revenue and $35 million in losses. I will be following this story as it unfolds. This is Lavana Vasa reporting on California for the Pro Cannabis Network.
And finally, the Massachusetts Report has a new sponsor this week. CNA Stores in Amesbury and Haverhill is veteran-owned and family-operated. This is the Bay State Cannabis Report, and sure enough, the Cannabis Control Commission is still trying to figure out what to do with social club licenses and other directives from the law passed in 2016. One item that gained attention and discussion this week, which is amazing to me, is the fact that veterans are still being victimized by the archaic federal laws that won't allow our veterans gaining any access to medical marijuana. Now, they can still have plenty of opioids, but no plant medicines. So now the state wants to add PTSD to that list of the state diagnoses to qualify for a medical card. Now, this end around will allow our veterans to gain a card for a fee and buy medical cannabis for a fee. It won't be free like those VA doctor prescribed opioids, but at least they will have access to the plant medicine that can help them. You know, of all the injustices that this industry and those most impacted by the failed war on drugs must endure, the fact that our veterans don't have access to a plant that can help them gain transition back into society is just unconscionable to me. These veterans have put their lives on the line for our freedoms by serving in the military and can't get access to a plant? Come on. Out in Greenfield, Massachusetts, a sleepy New England town in northwestern part of the state near North Adams, the Flower Expo made its debut as a private event for the business-to-business community in the Bay State. There were over 200 exhibitors there, and it was packed. Congratulations to Jason and Todd Bello, who organized this event, which is sure to become a must-attend show and, of course, after party in the New England cannabis calendar. That's Weed Talk News for this week. I'm PCM Founder Jimmy Young, filling in for the vacationing Elena Pinto. Thanks for bearing with my voice challenges today. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly.
The Massachusetts Cannabis Report on Weed Talk News is supported by CNA Stores, a veteran-owned and family-operated cannabis dispensary with 2 locations in Amesbury and in Haverhill, dedicated to the community north of Boston and to consumers by providing the widest selection of products in the state.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weejits filtration system. What? The Weejits.com, Weejits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weejits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it could make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems. Whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Sativa Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Sativa understands the importance for accurate on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Sativa Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com. The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Canatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at canatrols.com.